Welcome to this custom deep dive. We are thrilled you're here with us today.
Yeah, really glad you could join us.
So if you've ever looked around your life, maybe at the slang you casually drop into conversation with your friends,
Right.
or, the specific kind of food sitting on your dinner plate tonight.
Or even the cut of the jeans hanging in your closet.
Exactly. And you just wonder, how exactly did all of this get here? Well, you are in the exact right place. We have this really fascinating stack of geographic and sociological research in front of us today.
And it is a huge stack.
It is. Our mission here is to figure out the invisible mechanics of how everyday things travel across the globe to reach you. We're looking specifically at AP Human Geography Topic 3.4, Types of Diffusion.
Which is such a great framework. It really is an invisible mechanic. When you start to internalize these geographic concepts, it gives you a sort of like a matrix vision for human history.
Matrix vision, I love that.
It really is. Suddenly, nothing around you seems random anymore. That local fusion restaurant down the street or the viral video you just watched on your phone, everything has a starting point, a defined geographic origin, and a very specific path it took to eventually collide with your daily life.
And to get that matrix vision, we need to set the foundation with two core concepts that explain the movement of human culture. The first is diffusion itself.
Right.
In geographic terms, diffusion is simply the process by which ideas, innovations, or cultural traits spread across space and time. It's basically the engine of how societies influence each other.
Spot on. And the second concept you need is the cultural hearth.
Yes, the hearth.
A hearth is the specific physical geographic area where a cultural trait or an innovation actually originates. It's the birthplace of the idea. Every single cultural trait has a hearth.
Always.
It doesn't matter if it's an ancient religion or a modern piece of technology, there is a ground zero. And
Yeah.
from that hearth, it has to travel. Our goal today is to unpack the two main branches of how that travel actually happens across human populations.
Which are relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion.
Exactly. These are the two primary frameworks for how humanity shares, borrows, and sometimes forces its ideas onto new places.
So let's start with that first branch, relocation diffusion. This is defined by the physical migration of people. It is the literal movement of individuals from their cultural hearth to a brand new territory.
Yeah, they physically get up and go.
Right. When people pack up their lives and move, they do not arrive in a new place empty-handed. They bring their language, their religion, their food.
Well, they're deeply ingrained customs.
Yes, packed right in their suitcases, metaphorically speaking.
What's fascinating here is the historical gravity of this concept. It really cannot be overstated. When we talk about relocation diffusion, we are often talking about some of the most profound, world-altering movements of human beings in history.
For sure.
The mechanism here relies entirely on physical movement. A trait takes root in a new area simply because the carriers of that trait have physically walked, sailed, or flown there. It completely reshapes modern geopolitical borders.
Let's look at language to see how this plays out on a massive scale. If we want to know why English and Spanish are the dominant languages across the Americas today, we just have to look at relocation diffusion.
Yep, direct result.
It's European colonization. Galleons sailed across the Atlantic, carrying people who established colonial capitals and administrative centers. They brought their languages with them, and by establishing a physical presence, they locked in a linguistic map that we still live with centuries later.
We see a very specific, localized version of this pattern in Quebec, Canada as well.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. The reason there is a robust, deeply rooted French-speaking population in Quebec, acting almost like a linguistic fortress inside a predominantly English-speaking continent, is because that region was a French colony during the age of imperialism.
The language didn't just drift over the border.
No, not at all. It wasn't casual conversation. French citizens physically relocated there across the ocean. They lived there and established their linguistic hearth in a brand new geographic space.
And religion operates on this exact same physical mechanic. The spatial distribution of Catholic Christianity in Latin and South America today is completely tied to the physical movement of Spanish and Portuguese colonists.
They brought their faith from Europe when they crossed the ocean.
Exactly. And we should point out, this physical relocation of religion often resulted in the systematic replacing of indigenous religious practices that had existed there for millennia.
That brings up a crucial point about relocation diffusion. It isn't always a gentle, harmonious blending of cultures. Very often, historically, it is an imposition.
Yeah, it can be forceful.
But it can also happen through highly intentional, dedicated travel solely for the purpose of sharing an idea. Missionary work is the classic historical example here.
Right, like Buddhism.
Yes, consider the spread of Buddhism. Its cultural heart is in India, but it didn't just passively bleed over the borders. It spread into East Asia because missionaries undertook grueling physical journeys,
Walking over mountain ranges.
sailing across vast geographic distances, all to carry those teachings to new populations. The physical effort required to move an idea before the modern era is staggering.
Before we move on to the next framework, I want you to take a second and think about your own family's history.
Yeah, bring it home.
Whether your ancestors immigrated from across the globe generations ago, or your parents just moved across the country for a job, what cultural traits did they physically carry with them to where you live right now?
It could be anything.
Maybe it's a specific holiday tradition that no one else in your neighborhood celebrates, or a regional recipe that has been handed down. That is relocation diffusion playing out in your own kitchen.
Connecting it to your own life makes the scale of it much easier to grasp. Because once you understand how physical movement changes the map, you are ready for the second major framework. And this is where the rules of the game change completely.
Let's talk about the big pivot, expansion diffusion. The fundamental difference here is that with expansion diffusion, the people stay put.
The individuals aren't migrating.
No, the idea itself spreads legs and moves outward. And importantly, as the number of adopters grows in new places, the trait remains incredibly strong at its original origin point.
The hearth doesn't empty out. The idea expands outward, multiplying as it goes, rather than just relocating from point A to point B.
Exactly.
And within this broad category of expansion diffusion, we need to break it down into three very distinct subtypes based on how the idea travels: contagious, hierarchical, and stimulus diffusion.
Okay, let's unpack this. The first subtype of expansion diffusion is contagious diffusion. This is a rapid, widespread transition of a trait moving through a population.
Rapid is the key word.
The defining characteristic here is that it spreads to adjacent populations without any regard for social status, race, or hierarchy. If you are next to it, you catch it.
The best analogy is quite literally the spread of a disease. It relies purely on proximity and contact. Historically, that meant physical, person-to-person contact.
Like with farming.
Yeah, imagine the agricultural revolution. Let's say a farmer figures out a slightly more efficient way to plant a specific crop. How does that incredibly valuable idea spread before telephones or books?
It spreads contagiously.
Right. The farmer talks to their neighbor over the fence. That neighbor tries it, sees that it works, and tells the next farmer down the road at the local market. It ripples outward across the physical landscape, farmer to farmer, moving strictly through geographic adjacency.
That slow, methodical ripple effect across the countryside is fascinating to visualize. But if we fast forward to the modern era, the internet has taken that exact same contagious diffusion mechanism and accelerated it to warp speed.
Warp speed.
We are no longer waiting to talk over a literal fence. Viral social media trends on platforms like TikTok are pure contagious diffusion.
The digital landscape removes the friction of physical distance, but the pattern remains exactly the same. It's digital proximity now. It's all about who you are rubbing shoulders with in a comment section or a digital community.
Memes and slang words are perfect examples. Take the word stan, which means an overzealous or obsessive fan.
From the Eminem song.
Yes, an early 2000s Eminem song. Its adoption into everyday language didn't happen because people physically migrated across the country to teach to others. It spread contagiously through the internet.
Totally.
One person used it in a forum, their followers saw it, started using it in their own posts, and suddenly it's rippling through the global population. It hits everyone, regardless of whether they are a celebrity or a high school student.
Which assumes everyone is on an equal playing field.
True.
But what happens when the playing field is entirely uneven? Contagious diffusion is famously democratic. It hits everyone equally. But there's a whole other side to expansion diffusion that relies entirely on structure, inequality, and power.
You're talking about hierarchical diffusion. This is a top-down spread. In hierarchical diffusion, traits originate in nodes of power.
Big nodes.
We are talking about large, influential cities, powerful political leaders, or incredibly wealthy individuals. The trait starts at the very top of a hierarchy, and then eventually filters its way down to the general population, or to smaller, less influential geographic locations.
The sheer variety of how this plays out in human history is astounding. The mechanism here isn't about who you are standing next to. It's about influence, authority, or capital. The trait leaps from node to node before it ever touches the ground level.
Fashion is the textbook example of this top-down spread. When a revolutionary new clothing trend emerges, it doesn't usually start organically in a small town in the middle of nowhere.
No, never.
It starts in major fashion hubs, nodes of immense cultural influence like Paris, Milan, or New York.
Yeah.
It's worn by high-fashion models on a runway. Then it filters down to exclusive boutique stores in big cities.
And eventually, maybe a year or two later, modified versions of it make their way to the department stores and suburban shopping malls.
We see the exact same power dynamic with celebrity influence. Think about the global phenomenon of the Rachel haircut in the 1990s.
Oh, inspired by Jennifer Aniston on Friends.
Exactly. She functioned as a high-profile node of cultural power. Millions of people tuned in to watch that show every week looking up to that node. When she debuted a specific layered haircut, it broadcasted out, and fans worldwide immediately went to their local salons demanding the exact same look.
It didn't spread farmer to farmer.
Nope, it spread from one highly influential, highly visible person down to the masses.
But hierarchical diffusion isn't just about aesthetics and pop culture. It profoundly impacts technology and wealth. Think about expensive, paradigm-shifting innovations like the combine harvester.
That's a huge piece of machinery.
Right. When an incredibly complex, expensive piece of farming machinery is first invented, the everyday, small-scale farmer cannot afford it. The innovation initially diffuses only among the wealthiest farmers or massive corporate agricultural operations, those at the absolute top of the economic hierarchy.
Wealth acts as a strict gatekeeper for the idea.
Exactly. It's only later, as the technology is refined, mass-produced, and becomes cheaper, that it slowly filters down and becomes an accessible reality for the average farmer.
Political authority provides an even starker example of this top-down mandate.
Yeah.
If we look back at the Holy Roman Empire in the year 1555, there was an incredibly significant treaty called the Peace of Augsburg.
At a time when Europe was tearing itself apart over religious divisions.
Yes. This treaty established a principle that allowed regional princes to literally choose the religion, either Catholicism or Lutheranism, for their specific territories. Whatever the prince chose, the thousands of people living underneath his rule essentially had to adopt.
The geographic boundaries of a person's faith were drawn entirely by the whims of a handful of nobles. That is the ultimate top-down mandate.
It really is.
The juxtaposition here is incredible. When you map it out geographically, a 16th century religious treaty in the fractured states of the Holy Roman Empire shares the exact same spatial diffusion pattern as a 1990s sitcom haircut.
Or an expensive piece of modern farming equipment.
Yes. They are all hierarchical. They all start at a concentrated point of immense influence, wealth, or power, and then filter downward to the broader population. It highlights how these geographic models apply across entirely different eras and contexts of human history.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when an idea tries to spread, whether contagiously or hierarchically, and it suddenly runs into a wall?
The local culture pushes back.
Exactly. And that brings us to our third and final subtype of expansion diffusion, stimulus diffusion.
This is often referred to as the chameleon effect of diffusion.
Stimulus diffusion happens when the underlying concept of an innovation spreads to a new geographic area, but the specific trait is actually rejected or heavily modified. And this happens because the idea hits a severe cultural barrier or a strong local preference.
The core concept manages to survive, but the physical reality of the trait adapts to fit its new environment.
The mechanism driving this is adaptation. It's not a pure copy and paste transfer like contagious or hierarchical diffusion. The receiving culture takes the incoming idea, puts it through their own deeply ingrained local filter, and creates something entirely new out of it.
The global expansion of fast food is a brilliant showcase of this. McDonald's is a corporate juggernaut. Their entire business model is based on spreading their specific concept of fast food, incredibly quick service, and a highly standardized menu all over the world.
But consider what happened when they expanded into India.
Right.
In India, cows are widely considered sacred in the majority Hindu culture. You cannot just drop a standard American beef hamburger into that cultural landscape. The specific trait, the beef patty, would be completely rejected, and the business would fail.
So stimulus diffusion takes over to solve the problem. The underlying concept of McDonald's, the highly efficient, fast service restaurant model, successfully diffuses into India, But the specific trait adapts drastically.
They drop the beef entirely from the menu.
Yes. Instead, they introduce items like the Maharaja Mac, which uses a chicken patty, and the McSpicy Paneer, which uses a very popular local Indian cheese. The core idea of the fast food franchise spread, but the physical form of the food changed to respect the local boundaries.
We see this chameleon effect happen with deeply rooted cultural practices too, like yoga. Yoga originated in South Asia. In its cultural hearth, it is a deeply religious, intensely spiritual practice tied to Hinduism.
But as it diffused globally and eventually reached Western countries, it hit a significant cultural barrier.
Many Western adopters were interested in the physical benefits, but weren't looking to adopt a new religion.
So the religious and spiritual components were largely stripped away or discarded. The core concept of the physical postures and the breathing exercises remained, but it was adapted primarily into a secular physical fitness routine.
The idea spread, but its fundamental meaning mutated.
Culinary innovation is absolutely full of stimulus diffusion. Take traditional Japanese sushi. In its cultural hearth, sushi relies on incredibly specific generational preparations of raw fish, vinegared rice, and seaweed.
When that culinary concept initially diffused to Western countries decades ago, eating raw fish was a tough sell for the average palate.
It faced a massive cultural barrier, so the concept was adapted to survive. We get the invention of sushi-inspired rolls like the California roll,
Which uses cooked imitation crab.
and adds avocado. And it specifically hides the seaweed on the inside of the rice so it looks more approachable.
It's the chameleon effect in action. The idea of the sushi roll survives, but the ingredients completely change to bypass the barrier.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, stimulus diffusion is arguably the most important mechanism for protecting global cultural diversity. We live in a hyper-connected era where traits spread faster than at any point in human history.
It's everywhere.
But stimulus diffusion is the primary reason why global culture hasn't become entirely homogenized into one boring, uniform blob. Local cultures don't just passively receive information from the outside world, they actively demand adaptation. They take the new idea, break it apart, and make it their own.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a breath and synthesize everything we've unpacked today. We've explored the master framework for how everyday things, from your vocabulary to your dinner, reach you. It really boils down to two main avenues.
Right.
First, traits move because people physically move. They pack up their lives, migrate across oceans or borders, and bring their culture with them, locking in new geographic realities. That is relocation diffusion.
And second, traits spread on their own while the people stay put. That is expansion diffusion, and it happens in three distinct ways.
It can spread like a virus through simple contact, hitting everyone equally regardless of status. That's contagious diffusion.
It can leap from nodes of immense power, wealth, or influence down to the masses. That's hierarchical diffusion.
Or the core idea can spread, but mutate and adapt to bypass a local cultural barrier. That is stimulus diffusion.
Having this mental model completely changes how you view your surroundings. You are now a much sharper observer of the world. The next time you look at a menu at a local fusion restaurant, or see a highly specific piece of clothing in a store window, or hear a brand new viral slang term, you don't just see the object in isolation.
No, you can actually pinpoint exactly how it traveled, mutated, and diffused through human populations to reach your exact coordinates.
It's an incredibly powerful tool for critical thinking. And before we wrap up today, this framework raises one final important question, something to really mull over as you look at the world this week.
Let's hear it.
We've talked extensively about how cultural traits spread outward from a cultural hearth and how they often mutate through stimulus diffusion as they go. But in our modern world, the flow of information isn't a one-way street anymore. What happens to the original hearth when its adapted, highly commercialized trait gets sold back to it from across the globe?
Ooh.
If a deeply spiritual practice becomes a secular fitness craze, or a traditional dish becomes a global fast food staple, and that new mutated version is beamed back to the origin point through the internet and global trade, does the hearth eventually lose its own authenticity? Or does that feedback loop just create an entirely new, incredibly complex kind of culture?
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. The map is always changing, and human culture never truly stops moving. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you take these concepts out into your day and keep questioning the origins of the world around you. Keep looking for those invisible mechanics, and we will catch you next time.